The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening. I'm Ronda Dixon. I'm your host for tonight. I am a lawyer that has been practicing in California for over 30 years. And my specialty right now is criminal law, but I've done a number of different aspects of the law. Today we're going to be looking at the American slave nation. That's what we're going to discuss. It's the case for reparations. And we have an interesting guest on who has developed a whole program around the American slave nation and an understanding that we have to see ourselves a little differently and reframe the narrative, because a lot of the times that we have tried to make some type of reparations for slavery through social programs, they've turned into welfare programs, they've turned into things that benefited other ethnic groups more so than us, and they never really lived up to the promise that they had for African Americans. And literally, you know, we've been sugarcoating it. Our leaders have been sugarcoating it and trying to take it positively, because there are certain people that have made a lot of money. And once they do get that money, they sort of kick the ladder down. So I bought some rose-tinted glasses so that I could look through these and say, hey, you know, I want to see what it looks like. This is what we do. We try to make it positive. We try to make it, we go along to get along. But what we really need to do is change the narrative and not accept being treated as second-class citizens in a country that we built. Like Michelle Obama said, she slept in a house that was built by American slaves. So with that, I want to introduce my guest, Dr. Gerald Higginbotham. He's a airline pilot as well as a doctor, and he also has some books that he's written and some other things that he's done that I'd like him to more, elaborate a little bit more on. He'll talk about some other things that inspired him to start on this journey. Dr. Higginbotham, you're on now.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
I'm great. Can you tell me a little bit more about yourself?
Well, I'm Native American.
Okay.
I'm a descendant of American slaves.
Right.
I was born here in South Central Los Angeles, and I grew up in the Watts area and then moved to Inglewood, and from there really started the journey. I've been on a mission since the night Dr. King was assassinated. We are, when our community in Watts burned down in 65 and 68. And so I've been on this journey to look at what's been causing this. And we're still dealing with the after effect of American slavery. It was never properly been put to bed. And so I've had the opportunity to begin to really define it really for what it is. A couple things that we have to, I want to get right into it. Who I am really doesn't matter. It's what we got to become as a culture. We are America's first culture. We are the descendants of American slaves, not African Americans. African American is the United States immigration term for the whites and blacks that were birthed on the continent of Africa that has legally come here by plane and boat and nationalized. We are Americans, those that were bred here in this country. America created a culture on those 7 southern states, created the American slave culture. And we've got birthrights here to the United States of America. And our culture, we're brought here by force, not by choice, but by force.
And I want to elaborate on that a little bit as a lawyer.
This land here and created a new culture, the American slave culture. And America has been a deadbeat parent to her firstborn and to her descendants. And so we're going to have to change. We've been off course. And I know as a commercial airline captain, you can be 1/10 of a degree off course. You're not going to arrive at your destination. I'm kind of excited about what's going on in America right now because America is being reset. We've been shifted from an industrial-based society to the information age, so it's a new ballgame.
Right.
And so what we have to do is fix the foundation. There's a crack in America's foundation, and the descendants of American slaves are the crack. And this crack is widening so far, it has turned into an economic gap for most people. And what's going on right now, we can fix this thing when you have the right process, plan, and execute it in a manner that will begin to bring about change from the bottom up.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that in stages. So basically, from a legal standpoint, I'm going to examine these things from a legal standpoint, and you'll examine them from a cultural standpoint, and the fact that your point is that we actually were bred here. We are the system of slavery disconnected Americans who are descendants of slaves, disconnected them from their ancestry, disconnected them from even being able to go back, so that once we were so-called liberated, we were not even able to go home because we didn't know where to go to. And I want to speak a little bit more about the, you're right to bring up the immigration status. I practice immigration law as well. And it's a difference between being a forced migration as opposed to a naturalized citizen that comes in through a process and is accepted here. And many times there are programs to even onboard them into businesses, giving them business loans, and a lot of programs that were actually created supposedly for African Americans, but let's say descendants of slaves, that were never actually, that were opened up immediately to anyone that was other than white. So it really just diluted our power. The reparations that we fought for were never given to us, and they were diluted and given out to other people. They say that white females were the biggest beneficiary of the affirmative action programs that were in the 60s and 70s and 80s. Also transferring wealth once again back into the white community for the most part. So they used that law that was brought about by our struggle, by people that died, people like Dr. Martin Luther King, different people that fought, struggled, and died for it, finally got it, but it was actually something that was watered down and used for other people to succeed.
Part of the problem, Rhonda, is that in America, America operates off of contracts. The American slave culture has not been properly identified. America is about capitalism. It's about business. The American slave after the American Civil War was never properly put in the economic pecking order. We've been called slaves, colored, Negro, black, now African American. Which one is it, and why so many name changes? The reason why it's been like that is to cover the shame and the crime of slavery. Yes. Slavery was a crime against humanity, yes. And that debt is still out there. They owe the American slave culture $105 trillion. That's that's owed to that culture, and that debt is still out. It has to be repaid, and it's going to be repaid the way we're going to implement a process to bring about the social economic change from the bottom up. I'm so excited about it. It is one of the greatest times to be alive, and when you really understand that we are Americans, not African Americans, that's a United States immigration term. We got to get it right, and right now, as America is being reset, let's fix the foundation. We prepare the foundation, do it right. We can see about a change that is going to bless everybody. America will be made whole.
So,
I'm excited.
Dr. Higginbotham, have you had a lot of pushback from other people, say other African Americans, of your program?
Because I've had a lot of pushback from African Americans because they know the game. They know they're African Americans. So a lot of folks from Africa has come over here and have benefited from it.
Yes.
It's been to their advantage as African Americans. But the American slave culture, they're two different groups. And we have to fix this thing. That's why we've had so many riots, because of the fact that the American slave culture was not put in the economic pecking order. After the American Civil War, that whole war was about freeing the American slaves. And the American slaves never was properly documented. And so this is why we still have this struggle. But we're going to fix it on our watch. Yes. I promise you. because we now have the right insight, and we have the right processes, and the timing is impeccable. We're going to be on the right side of history, what we're doing. And it's going to bless many people. But they have to, our culture, that has been the pushback because they don't like the name slave.
Right.
That name is valuable. It's worth $105 trillion. I liked it so much, I went and had it copyrighted. Mm-hmm. So I own the copyright to the name slave. And when you own something, Attorney Dixon, you are now in power to change the narrative. And that's just what I have done, because that name slave does not mean what you think it means. Mm-hmm. I tell people, looking only at what you see keeps you from becoming who you can be. But when you really understand the name slave, S period, L period, A period, V period, E period, it has a whole total different meaning. And when people hear it, they're like, Dr. G, that's phenomenal. I see myself as an American slave. I said, technically we are, but we had to change the narrative to make it positive, where so people can embrace it now and we can move forward.
Now you change it to an acronym, and the acronym means what?
Well, the letter S means we're saved, we're sanctified, we're set apart, we are the sons and daughters of the Most High, we're special. The letter L means we're leaders. It means we're lovers, we're learners. The letter A means we're awesome, we're anointed, we're appointed, we're achievers, we are admired. Everybody admire our culture. The letter V means we're vibrant, vivacious, victorious. The letter E means we're excellent, we're excited, we're exuberant, we're enablers. We change the narrative. I tell people, you have to become the change that you want to see. And you have to have the mindset, if it is to be, it's up to me. And so I became that word slave. I own it. I am an American slave. Listen, it's time for us to wake up. We've been duped, hoodwinked, and bamboozled, calling ourselves black. Black is a color. It's a description. It's an adjective. It's not a culture. It's not a nationality. It's not a religion. It's not a race. It's an adjective. It's not a noun, person, place, or thing. So we got to change and get back on course, because in this country here, America operates off of contract. In that U.S. Constitution, if you go look at Amendment Chapter 14, Section 2 and 4 of the Constitution, you'll see only two races of people in there: Indians and slaves. The Indians started their nation. Mm-hmm. The slaves, they integrated into the larger society. And because of that, they have kept us locked in the lowest level of a real life monopoly game. And it's time for us to move out right now, immediately, because things are not going to get any better in our country if we keep doing what we've been doing. We'll keep getting what we've been getting. We cannot go back to the old norm. We got to have a new norm.
How do you propose to bring that about? I'm
so glad you asked. You asked an awesome question. One of the first things that we have to do is correct the name. And we're doing this here on the 2020 census. I tell everyone, I went to Washington, D.C. and spoke with my state congressman, and we got into a little argument, but then he settled and understood where I was coming from as it relates to the name slave. And he ran it up the poll as it relates to, can we get the American slave put on the 2020 census? Found out, yes, we can. Page 6 or 7, box 7, line 8, we can write in American slave, just like that. Because that will now, once we get enough of us that have done that, billions of dollars now can flow back to our communities so we can fix the community for the American slave culture. The second thing that we're doing, I'm about to launch a culture business incubator. Dr. King told us that the next battle that be fought for Negroes will be out at the economic battlefield. We have never been out to the economic battlefield as the American slave culture. And so our group don't know about business. We do business. And see, we got to learn how to do culture business. We got to do business in our culture's name, because this country operates off of contracts. The slave name is in there in the 14th Amendment, Section 4. We got to begin to do culture business as the American slave culture. When we do this here, we're going to see a major change from the bottom up.
Mm-hmm. Now, how is that different from minority set-aside contracts and the recent case that was in the Supreme Court, where they were fighting over the contract provision that was made shortly after the Civil War. It was supposed to include African Americans or Africans or descendants of slaves in the ability to contract.
Okay, we got to separate them.
Okay, the descendants of slaves were supposed to be included on an equal basis for contracting purposes.
There never was.
Right.
They've created these other programs, minority, where they let the white women. I'm keeping it real with you.
Yes.
They have benefited from it. Many cultures have come to this country here and has been thrown into a pot, and it has separated. What we must do is have a set-aside program specifically for the American slave culture. The American slave culture has been discriminated against racially and economically. It's like that even on the 501c corporations, nonprofit. Slavery was the foundation of this nation.
Yes.
And they have set up these 501c foundations to help offset some of the crap that has been going on by corporate America. But our culture, the American slave culture, has been discriminated against even at the 501c3 level. So money could never come back to us because we have not been properly organized. But the good news is the American Slave Inc. nonprofit 501c3, it is set up to help to organize the descendants of American slaves and to train them so that they can begin to enter out into the mainstream America and do business, not business, but we're going to do business.
Now, you know, Malcolm.
So I'm so excited.
Yes. Now, you know, Malcolm X said power will not concede. They won't concede anything without a struggle. And we've been through this continuous struggle for over 200 years, ever since we freed ourselves. We actually freed ourselves, you know, because there was a number of free people that got into the war. The issue is that we have never been we fought against this power structure over the course of 200 years, changed the laws. We're the only group. The fact that we have an issue and that we've been treated second class is evidenced by the fact that we've had to change the law. And actually, we're the only group in America that has to have a law telling people they have to respect our rights. They have to give us civil rights. They have to actually allow us to contract. If we were just Americans, then we wouldn't have that problem. In Mexico, for instance, the two generals that liberated Mexico were both considered mulatto, half black and half white. But when the generals liberated Mexico from the Emperor Maximilian under Napoleon, he changed the narrative by changing their birth certificates and saying that every single person in Mexico would be called Mexican, and there would be no designation of race, so that there was no differences that they could identify and say, oh, this one gets treated differently because of that. But in America, they're still very meticulous. That's how you know that it's still a slave society, because slave societies have to keep those records. If the slavery is based on racial differences, then it's very important that they keep those records. And that's a continuing, in the law, we call that a continuing trespass. This is like I just was watching something where this white man was saying, he's a financial advisor, and he said, I don't believe we should give any reparations because I don't know anyone that holds slaves right now. Well, they may not be holding slaves contemporaneously. However, they've benefited from generational wealth of pushing forward the monies that their ancestors got and inheriting it down the line from the stolen wealth. I know from my own experience of having a business, 30% or more of your costs are labor. Sometimes as high as 40 to 60% of the cost of your company is labor. And if you're not able to pay those payrolls on time, then your business goes under. So if nothing else, the wage theft, which is being enforced and really helps immigrants a lot right now. The Labor Commissioner is enforcing wage theft. But what about the wage theft that happened back then that fueled this country that we don't ever participate in? And like you said, that's where the trillions of dollars, I'm assuming that you calculated that number of $100 trillion based on amortizing the monies that were, generated from the slave trade, from cotton and from cotton, from sugar, from tobacco, all the crops that were grown then. That were big money crops that dominated the world economy during those times. I was actually reading, there's a article series called 1619 that the New York Times has put out, which is really very illustrative of this whole phenomena of how if you take even the fact that the reason why Black people are not in the Constitution is because they actually split. The people that wrote and drafted the Constitution were all criminals. They split from the UK. They split from England solely because England had already freed their slaves and they had a pang of moral conscience. And the colonists didn't want to free their slaves. They were just making too much money. It was just an economic benefit that they didn't want to give up. It wasn't about taxation. It was about telling them that they couldn't have slaves. And they fought against that, shed blood against that. But it's sort of like the misinformation that happens now, and it's happened from the beginning of this nation, is they say one thing, as the Indians say, they speak with a forked tongue. They say one thing, but do another. And actions speak louder than words, right? So we have to look at the actions. We can't really look at the words. The words look really good. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that every person is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But yet correct. Farther down, they go into this separation and defining that certain people aren't people.
Our issue is simple, Rhonda. We are the only culture, the American slave culture is the only culture that don't have a Declaration of Independence or a constitution. Mm-hmm. That's been our issue. The good news is that we now have our constitution and we have a Declaration of Independence that we can begin to use. You got to read the book, America's Little Black Book. It's a phenomenal book that Dr. Norris Shelton has written, right. And it's designed to help us wake up. It's an excellent book that will begin to heal the foundation of America. I'm going to stick my toe out there. Slavery was the foundation of the United States. Yes. It was the economic engine. It was the cornerstone to this society. Yes. Every tax dollar, let me back up. Every business here in the United States has been put on top of the American Slave Foundation. Yes,
I agree.
Every business. Every tax dollar that is created belongs to the American slaves culture. Every tax dollar. But because that group has not been properly organized, and because our group was lacking in knowledge to how to do this, how to build a nation, the American slave culture has been suffering. And that's been a leadership problem because everything rises and falls on leadership. Everything. We've been trying to fit into a burning house. Dr. King said, I believe I'm wrong. I'm taking us and putting us into a burning house. He was right. Yeah. America has lost the little moral vision that it has. Yeah. And a nation that's not governed by morality is a nation that's in trouble. It's headed for it's in a deep hole. And that's where we find ourselves. We have to come together, get on one accord, get the right information, begin to work with and through one another, and join this process here that will begin to heal us. Get this book, America's Little Black Book. It will be a blessing. It will change your life forever. You will have a paradigm shift. You will see things totally different because now you'll be in the know. And one of the things I'm doing here in Los Angeles, because I'm back home. Los Angeles, I'm so excited to be back home after 30 years of living in St. Louis, out there working with one of the airliners. But I've been transferred back here, and the timing is impeccable because now I'm rolling out a process to heal the community with our Renaissance plans that we're going to put in place here to begin to bring about the change. We are going to make it happen. We don't have a choice. Right. We've been doing the wrong thing. And I know as a commercial airline captain, 1/10 of a degree off course, you're not going to arrive at your destination. It ain't happening. And so we have to rethink the whole thing. Since America's in a reset mode, this is the perfect time for us to learn, get new information while we're all stuck on the internet, get some good data, and begin to, when we can come out of this thing well prepared to fix our communities. But change begins with self. Yes. We got to acknowledge we're Americans. We are the descendants of American slaves, not African slaves, but American slaves. Because America bred slaves in this country on those 7 southern plantations. Yes. And America has been wrong. She has purposely have locked this culture into the lowest level of a real life monopoly game. But you can't do it no more. because we are evolving. We have to shift. And with us shifting to the information age, it's a whole new different paradigm. We got the knowledge. We can begin to move forward in a very systematic way that will help our people so we can leave a positive legacy and benefit those that's coming behind us.
Now, one thing I look at is, being an airline pilot puts you at the top echelon of, it's one of the top echelons of earnings as well as status in this community, in the slave, descendants of slaves, basically. But you had a tough time. You shared with me your journey. And it's not the same it's the same as a lot of other people have had this same journey, which shows that this economic disempowerment is real, that you had to fight to become a pilot, correct?
It's been by design. I'm bold. I had to sue 4 airlines, and they told me to sue them. So one of them told me to sue them, and so don't threaten me because I'll do that. I took them to court, and therefore I was able to really see the working of how the justice system works.
Yes.
It really doesn't work in our favor.
Yes.
It favors big business, corporate America.
Yes.
And so I learned that this country here, big business is the key to being empowered.
But you have to have the keys to that key. I mean, it's not easy to become big business. Like if you look at examples such as, when Bill Cosby, before he got all these charges, when he was actually having the 2 highest paying shows on television at the time on NBC, and then NBC was in trouble and they put the network on the market. They actually took it off the market when he wanted to buy it and the only possible reason, his money is green. It had to be because he was black. That had to be the reason. There was no other reason.
Descendant of American slaves.
Descendant of American slaves.
I don't like using that term black because it's misleading, and we have to stop. This is where the change is going to have to come with us.
Okay.
We got to stop using those terms that are not going to be. Black does not empower you, and people don't like liars. The world know that we got them calling themselves. They don't even know who they are. And when you don't know who you are, you're not going to know what you are and what you've been called to do. We have to call it for what it is. We have to be crystal focused. Now, here's what was going on with Bill Cosby. Bill still had a job. He didn't own nothing. He didn't produce anything. He was on a show. Me flying the jet, I don't own that airline. I have a job. We got to shift our thinking from having jobs now to be about business ownership.
That's not exactly true. In the example I gave you, actually, he did own a company. He owned his production company. He produced 2 of the highest grossing shows. And based on the revenue coming in from those shows, when the network was put for sale, he actually was able to finance the purchase of that network. And when they found out that he had a credible, tender for that network, they took it off the market. They did the same thing when Babyface wanted to buy a distributorship. They took it off the market because he wanted to have, just like you're saying, he wanted to have that business. He wanted to be able to own a business. And the same thing happened recently. Why do I keep forgetting his name? The one that just did the case, the Comcast case. He just had a similar problem come up, and that's what he was saying is that even if we get a ownership of networks, Byron Allen, yeah, I keep trying to, okay. So Byron Allen was making the case that even when they let us have a seat at the table, it's limited because out of the billions and trillions of dollars that are coming from network media, the African American contracts in the aggregate were less than 10 million. And yet we know that there are shows that are dominated. And those shows, that revenue from those shows, let's look at sports. The revenue from sports is huge, but very few Africans, we'll say, it's really hard because we go through all these different changes of names. Okay. So this is going to be a hard part for you too, to get people to say they're a slave. That's going to be difficult.
They can call themselves DAS.
Well, there's another group that calls themselves ADOS, Adult American Descendants of Slaves.
That's a whole nother issue that we don't want to go on this show.
But the point is that they're still acknowledging American Descendants of Slaves. So the point I'm trying to make is it has to be something, maybe an acronym or something that's easier to say. But the point is that there have been forces economically working against us that are so powerful that they it's not that we're not organized. Sometimes it is a matter of us not being organized, but we have to be our own bank. We have to be we have to actually marshal everything like we did with Black Wall Street and things like that, because we just cannot ask them for anything, because power concedes nothing without a struggle.
Well, here's the thing that we have to do. We do business as individuals. I'm talking about doing business as big business, doing culture business. There's 21 million descendants of American slaves living here in the United States. That's a nation within a nation. We have to do business, culture business, not individual.
Can you define
Brian
that?
Allen is an individual.
Can you define that?
That's why I say it's important that the American slave culture get properly identified so we can do culture business, not individual.
Okay, so what does that mean, though? I'm asking you to define that.
What it means is that we're going to have a new business model. For example, even in America right now, small businesses cannot compete with the franchises. So that business model that they've been using will not work. So we have to look at a new model for the new society that we just shifted to, the information age. And I have a model that I'm going to introduce here through the Culture Business Incubator that will create a new bottom-up model where we can create business ownership where it stays in the community and that the community owns the businesses.
Right. So, yeah, there are ways for community-owned businesses. I believe I actually took a course in social justice at Harvard, and I wrote a paper on that, these community businesses. But this is the issue. It does have to be community businesses, but like you said, there has to be a mindset where teamwork makes the dream work, because so many people want to break out and be the star. So many people, I applaud you for being successful and still trying to reach back and help people, because I used to always say this, I'm a lawyer, and if I don't do what I can to help other people, what happens is in a crucial moment, the same thing happens to you because of our, people think that if they get there and kick the ladder down, oh yeah, there's no responsibility, but they see us as a collective, even if we don't see ourselves as a collective. So we're only as strong as our weakest link. And as long as we don't go back and help individuals who we might even look down upon, then the issue becomes they become us. They become that's how a person who's affluent could be driving in a white community and get shot, because white people just see this person who fits this profile that they've already been told is a second-class citizen. They don't see that this person has money, probably more than they do, and the socioeconomic status. All they see is this individual a certain way, and then they end up getting shot. And then they wonder, okay, so maybe if I had helped improve my culture and my people, then maybe this whole narrative would not be possible, to where they can just demonize an individual based on how they look.
Let me tell you what I'm so excited about this new 21st century, because we are literally creating a new society from the bottom up, where we're going to put in a new social construct, a new political construct, a new economic construct. Right now we have, for example, our democracy is representative, where these people come to our communities, kiss our babies, and then after the polling stop, they go back and let big business control them. We're going to create a new democracy called participatory democracy, where we will put people in office. We will control them. As we begin also to create a new social structure, put in a new net for the people so that they won't fall through the crack. So we got work to do. And I'm so glad. Thank you for having me on the show, because we had to fix the crack first. And I'm using America's Little Black Book. That is the mortar. It is the cement. And those who read that book, it's going to change their lives forever. Mentally, it's going to help heal them internally, because it is an inside-out approach first, because they took the people's minds from them. They have branded them to serve white America or European America, and they don't know who they are. They literally are slaves.
Talk more about that. In the book, he talks a lot about how people were treated, and a lot of people don't want to hear that. A lot of descendants of slaves don't want to hear that. They even say, like, if a movie like 12 Years a Slave, those movies usually aren't supported by us because people don't want to hear that. They don't want to revisit it. Whereas the people that call themselves Jews at this point in time, because they weren't always called Jews, at some point they were Hebrews, but they reframed their narrative, and they have they've taken charge of certain portions of the media section and continuously give us the story of their culture, and to the point where they've garnered sympathy, they've garnered support, and but we, on the other hand, it's been treated the opposite way.
Well, that's because we don't know who we are. And see, when you don't know who you are, you're not going to know what you can become. Now, let me share this with you. As relates to I'm going to go here just for a second. Part of the issue is leadership. The descendants of slaves go to church every Sunday, or they were going to church prior to the COVID-19. The church leaders don't know history. They want to give them a 3,000 year history ago, but they don't know about the last 400 years here. And so we got to relearn. We're going to have to learn, unlearn, and relearn. By the way, the definition of the literate of the 21st century is not going to be the person that do not know how to read or write. It will be the person that do not know how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And in this book here, America's Little Black Book, it has in here exactly what the preachers are going to have to do. They're going to have to get new information because they technically are the leaders that's over the congregants, the descendants of slaves. So we're going to have to work together. What's going to have to happen is community activists like myself and working with pastors and local politicians. We're going to have to come together around a plan so we can organize our communities effectively, empower them. Now is the time to do it with this reset here in America. It's the perfect time to fix the foundation. And I know we can do it. We're making it happen right now. We got training online on Facebook. We got the Descendants of American Slave Wind of Change Facebook out there where people can go out there. If they don't even get the book, we're reading it to them online. We have no excuses because we got the tools and we have the technology to bring about the change and inform the people. We've got the Facebook Descendants of American Slave, and I changed the name just a little because I get a lot of African Americans joining the Descendants of American Slave. So I made it the Descendants of United States American Slaves. I made it very clear now that we're talking about the American slave culture because America bred slaves in this culture, and she created the last culture that has been created. And this is what God said. I'm going spiritual on you for just a second. And Mark 10:31, he said, the last shall be first. Not might, not maybe, shall be first. And the last culture that has been introduced to his human family is the American slave culture. And so as this culture is waking up, I'm so excited about the American Slave Nation. If you get this book, America Little Black Book, chapter 38, it talks about the American Slave Nation, the birth of a new nation. It is so exciting to know that we are in place to begin to bring about a beautiful change from the bottom up. It's going to heal our mother country. I'm American. I'm a descendant of slave. This is my home. I was born in Los Angeles, South Central LA. And now that I've gone around the world and back and understand what has happened, I know we're going to fix it. Because I'm going to tell you, it doesn't take many to bring about change. Just a few that's dissatisfied with the status quo in a small group. We can flip the script and help heal our community.
Well, we have a saying that a human revolution in one individual can change the course of history.
Hey, yes.
I have to say something that I've been, it might offend some people, but I was an agnostic for years. Finally, I became a Buddhist, and that was because it's a philosophy of life that makes it my responsibility to change whatever I want to change in my environment. Everything that's in my environment is based on the choices I made, and anything that I want to change, I need to change my choices. So
Absolutely.
What I like to do is have solutions, because a lot of times we have a lot of complaints, and then we really get bogged down into the emotionalism of complaining, and the Jewish people call it kvetching. And we waste a lot of time on that. And sometimes people, have accused me of it, but I'm just one of those just the facts type of person, So that's why I made it perfectly for me to be an attorney, because I just want to listen to the facts. I just want to figure out the facts and figure out what the solution is. I'm always critically thinking and analyzing things. What do we do? Now, there's one thing that I'm working on right now, and I need to have a group of people weigh in on it with amicus briefs and maybe a whole team of attorneys. But a few years ago in 2017, before the Criminal Court of The Hague, they actually had a mock trial against Monsanto. And that mock trial gave them, they found them guilty of crimes against humanity and something called ecocide, killing the environment. And finally, about a year or so ago, they finally found Monsanto guilty in the case with a descendant of slaves in Oakland. He was in the school district up in the San Francisco area. For 1 year, he had a job to spray Roundup on the greenery to kill the weeds. After that year, he developed a rare form of cancer, and the jury gave him a very excessive settlement, something like $240 million, because they were able to prove conclusively that had he not been using Roundup, something called glyphosate, that he would not have gotten this rare form of cancer. And people have been trying to prove that for years. Now, the mock trial was had because the United States is not under the jurisdiction of the Criminal Court of The Hague. I had the privilege to actually meet several of the justices one time when I was at a conference for lawyers, the California, our Bar Association conference. And I just walked into one of the panels that was put together by the Criminal Court of The Hague. And I was surprised to find that the justices were all American lawyers. And they told me that the court was actually based on American law, and it was funded by America. However, America is not subject to jurisdiction of that court because the first person that would have to be prosecuted would be the sitting president of the United States of America, because every single president is guilty of crimes against humanity because they are the commander-in-chief of the military. Correct. And our military does a lot of things in our name that makes it unsafe for us to travel in the world. Because of the things that we don't know. We have a lot of propaganda here, and I'm talking about everybody, even the other people. They think that they know what our country does, but they don't. So this insidiousness, so that's why I'm a little concerned, because from the point of being a lawyer, I understand your optimism about us being able to get together and level the playing field somehow economically. But as you know, Dr. King got killed, and that was his main, towards the end, that was his message, was that the next field of play would be economics. And he actually got killed because he was joining with the garbage workers that were all black at the time, all, descendants of slaves, because they gave them the menial jobs just as they had when they were slaves. And they weren't paid very well. They had a hazardous job. And they were striking to get better working conditions. And that's why he was in Memphis on the day that he got killed, because he was addressing that issue and trying to be supportive. And he has a lot of speeches that they're not his most publicized speeches, where he talks about the housing discrimination and all of the different economic things that have happened to American descendants of slaves. Basically, during the New Deal, all those different things, descendants of slaves were shut out of all of those programs. Even if they were a veteran, they were not allowed to participate in those programs. And there was a vast distribution of wealth where they actually gave houses to white folks. Anybody coming in immigrating, that's why they immigrated, because they could come and sit on land and just take land. They were just given land. That's how this country was settled, by people that came in and stole land from the indigenous people and stole land from anybody. They just squatted on the land, and they didn't have to pay anything for it. So even that is a major benefit. But people, descendants of slaves never got that. It was the most cruel thing to release all those people without giving them any economic start, just like we're having this stimulus right now. Nothing. No money. They talked about 40 acres and a mule, but that program was dispersed before many people even got any of that. And I believe it was only started because right after the Civil War, when they actually did honor the vote, there was several descendants of slaves that became members of Congress. And they sponsored bills that got accepted that helped their people. But yet the Ku Klux Klan, the establishment, rolled all that back. I mean, there were laws on the books that were supposed to protect us, but they were all taken away.
Well, Rhonda, Attorney Rhonda, I agree with all that. However, we have to learn from history and do our best not to repeat it. We have shifted now from an industrial-based society to the information age. It's a new paradigm that we're in. You can see the banks, all of them are in trouble right now. And we have some plans and processes that we can put in place now where we can see the change that will heal our culture. It's going to heal America. I'm with you. I'm solution-oriented. When I fly the jet, I don't look backwards. I'm constantly looking forward. We've defined our new destination. We are going to move the people to the wealthy place. Because it says in Psalm 66:12, I've caused men to ride over your head. You've gone through fire and through water, but I brought you out into a wealthy place. Right now, the people are headed to the poverty place. You're either going to be wealthy, you're going to be poor. You're either going to be rich or poor, I should say. You're either headed to the wealthy place or you're headed to the poverty place. We now have the process to begin to move our people to the wealthy place. Hey, you got to check. We got to change our language. Here's the way we start. Rhonda, could you repeat these words? Today is the day.
Today is the day.
I make the wealthy place.
I make the wealthy place.
My new destination.
My new destination.
It's been ordained.
It's been ordained.
Since the foundation of time.
Since the foundation of time.
By my Creator.
By my Creator.
I'm going to line up my thoughts with His thoughts.
Now, you know I'm going to have to change that to her thoughts, right?
Hey, it could be a her. Because He made male and female. He created them.
But it's not a he in the first place. It's an androgynous being.
That's true. Being. That's possible. I'm with that. However, the problem is we got to change our thing. We don't know who we are. We're spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
We are spirits. We are all humans, but we haven't lined up our thought with the one that created the heavens and the earth. And as we do this, we get on one accord here, we're going to see the change on our watch before we cross back over. That's what I'm so excited about. It's not only about understanding now how the system works here, but also having that spiritual power. And when you have that and you understand how the new system, the new information age, social, political, and economic process work, you got the key to bring about the change. And we're going to do it here in Los Angeles. We are going to do it. It's not going to be an I-ism. It's a we-ism. Wow. God said, let us make man. He wasn't by himself. He had wisdom there. He had male, female. But it's our turn and it's our time, Rhonda. We're going to make it happen.
I believe that, but I still, can't put on the rose-tinted glasses because we've been disappointed a number of times. And the thing is that I want to say something. So this information age can be a blessing and a curse, because what I found out, I'm doing a deal right now with China. And I spoke to somebody that I know that works in the government in China that lives there and is very well connected in China. And he said that for the last year or so, everything they pay for has been electronically. They have gotten rid of currency in China. They pay through an app called WeChat. And every single thing is paid on their phone. So
and that's part of the information age.
They're trying to put us there. And I'm a conspiracy theorist, I'm sorry to say, but I've just seen evidence of conspiracies all the time. And I'm not like some freaky conspiracy theorist. I look at the facts. If a pebble falls in a pond and you didn't watch it fall, but you see the ripples, you can assume that a pebble was dropped because you can see the pattern. So we can trace this pattern back to this virus, for one, that is now disproportionately affecting people that are descendants of slaves. It is something that they've been doing for a while. I was at Caltech when they were doing immunology studies, and they were using HeLa cells, and I actually got to work with the HeLa cells, which I found out was a woman that was a descendant of slaves. That was her cells, and they never paid her for using her cells in research all over the world. They finally, I believe, got some reparations for that. But the point is that we're used a lot in medical experimentation. And right now, this particular virus, there's a lot of conspiracy theories that are circulating. It seems kind of fortuitous that it affects 40% more affects people of descendants of slaves, number one. Number two, it's some kind of a chimera. It's made of more than one animal protein, which means would suggest that it was made in a lab. And number three, it comes at a time, timing-wise, that was probably very good for the person who's in office right now, simply because his policies had already pretty much crashed our economy and the world economy. The tariffs against China, the border wall, the shutdown of the government, all those things were trillions of dollars. They put this country trillions of dollars in debt, and they created humongous trade deficits that would have come out. It would have been another crash like it was just before George W. Bush turned over the presidency to President Obama. Just before that, they announced a huge crash. Well, they did that because he had already had 2 terms. Now this guy wants another term, and he has to cover up his total ineptitude and his lack of economic abilities. Like he claims he's such a great businessman, but it's really the opposite. He's actually tanked the economy, and now he can blame it on something else. So,
well, Ron,
I want to see.
I have 2 things to say about that.
Yes.
Number one, viruses have always been around. I saw an article back in 1955 on the cover story of Life magazine where it says the war against viruses. And I can send that to you. When I saw that, I said the virus has always been around.
Right.
The second thing that I want to say is that anytime you crash an economy, somebody just got paid.
That's
we
right.
Just saw
it's
here
a major
theft. Wealth transformation.
Yeah.
He gave $58.3 billion to a service sector industry, the healthcare.
Yeah.
They're giving trillion. What we're witnessing is a major wealth transformation to the rich and poor people now. All of us now, if you're not too careful, are American slaves. Right. Because somebody's got to pay that debt back.
That's correct.
Who did you have in mind?
It's our money. It's the taxpayer money. And it's everybody's money, not just descendants of slaves. So, exactly.
Hey, so everybody's American slave now, whether they like it or not.
That's right.
Due to the federal government.
Well,
so we have to wake up because we have been hoodwinked and bamboozled. All of us.
Right. So well, I've been saying that for years, that this is a slave economy, because even the working conditions, you always have to get so many laws. And to this day, employment law is a big area of law. Now, why would you have to continuously police and try to make people comply with laws that they obviously don't want to comply with, because this is a slave nation? It's not just
America is a plantation.
It is.
The whole America is a plantation. Can we be real?
Yeah.
Hey, listen, they take so much out of my paycheck every month and give to the federal government without my permission. So we all are American slaves.
That's true.
I'm just keeping it real with you. And seeing when we walk in truth, that's when you can be made free. Because it says, if knowing truth makes you free, knowing a lie, incorrect data keeps you enslaved or in bondage. And it's time for us to walk in truth, all of us. Right. We're all in this together, and so we're going to have to work this thing together to fix it.
And so something interesting came up in the 1619 story. They said that the struggle of American descendants of slaves, has actually benefited everybody in this country.
Absolutely.
Our struggle has caused this country to be a more perfect democracy. It has caused this country to re-examine how it treats all of its people, and the laws that come into play to supposedly level the playing field for us, as we already noticed, have already been applied across the board for everyone else.
Whites want democracy. They want to keep blacks segregated. Yeah. 2 things. And just keeping it 100% real. We have to change that paradigm, change that narrative, because our country don't understand the truth that we are all Americans.
Right.
And what has happened, the it's 2 groups, slave master and descendants of slaves. And they've told their children that you guys are good, you're perfect. They've given them a false narrative. And so they're locked into a prison. And that the only way that they can get out, my white brothers and sisters, is that they have to have truth so that they can be made free. It's going to take a whole new bottom-up process, and we can do this. We have the tools. We must do it. We have the internet, and we got the training. We can bring about the change. I'm not optimistic. I'm a realist. It's time to flip the script.
Okay. So what tools do you have? What you told me about some plans you had in place. You said you made a model constitution?
Yes. No, not a model constitution. I'm the prime minister of the American slave nation. It has its Declaration of Independence and it has its constitution. And we did it according to international law, the law of nations.
And
this whole world operates off of the law of nation, international laws. Now, counsel, you know that international law takes precedence over everything. And so when you do it that way.
But you know what I just told you about international law was that the United States is not subject to it because we're the bullies on the block.
But here's the thing. They are subject to the laws of nation because they're one of the founding members of the United Nations.
Right.
5 nations are part of it.
Actually, we're not technically subject to the law of we're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United Nations, which is the irony because that gives the right to violate the laws but enforce them against other people. So, but anyway, with that, we have to wrap this up. What I wanted to know is, how do people get in touch with you? How do you get? How do they look at your Constitution and Declaration of Independence and those type of things? And how do they purchase the Little Black Book?
Well, they can go out to slaves with the S on slaves -USA.com. Slaves-USA.com.
Okay.
Because that's the quickest way where they can learn about what we're doing, where they can become members of the American slaving and participate. Get the books, because it's only when you have the knowledge it can begin to move you forward. Knowledge is a potential to power. But when you have it and then begin to act on the plan, the Renaissance plan, which we have out there, by the way, it's on sale for $10 this week. Mm-hmm. We're going to use these tools to leverage, to move us from where we are to where we need to be, knowledge, wealth, and power. Thanks for having me, Rhonda.
Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in, everyone in the audience. I'm Ronda Dixon. I'm your host. I'm an attorney. I'm specializing in a little niche called DUI law. So you can reach me at 877-DUILady.com, or you can call the number 877-DUI-LADY, which is 877-384-5239. And it's been a pleasure speaking with Dr. Higginbotham about the American slave nation and looking into reparations and how we right the wrongs that were created by the institution of slavery. Thank you.